You know what's wild? Right now, someone is thinking about texting you, but they won't do it. And it's not because they hate you or forgot about you, it's because their brain has convinced them that reaching out would be a burden. And somewhere in your contacts list, there's a person you used to talk to every day who has completely gone silent, and you've probably wondered if you did something wrong or if they're mad at you. But here's the thing that will blow your mind. Their silence has absolutely nothing to do with you and everything to do with a psychological phenomenon that most people don't even realize is happening to them. Psychology says when someone stops initiating contact, it's rarely a rejection of you specifically, but rather a reflection of their own emotional capacity and mental state, and understanding this can completely change how you interpret these situations and protect your own peace in the process. People who stop reaching out are often experiencing what psychologists call social fatigue, which is a state where the brain becomes overwhelmed by the demands of maintaining relationships. And this happens because every interaction requires emotional energy that gets depleted when someone is dealing with stress, anxiety, or depression. And your brain treats social obligations like physical tasks, so when you're already running on empty, the idea of sending a text or making plans feels like climbing a mountain, and it's not that they don't care about you, it's that they're in survival mode where even basic tasks feel impossible. And this is especially common in people who are natural givers because they've spent so long focusing outward that they have nothing left for themselves. And when this happens, they retreat not out of malice, but out of necessity, because their emotional reserves are completely drained. Research shows that some people stop reaching out because they've developed what's called learned helplessness in relationships, where past experiences have taught them that their efforts don't matter or won't be reciprocated. And this creates a mental pattern where they assume people don't really want to hear from them anyway. So why bother trying? And this isn't about being dramatic or seeking attention, it's a genuine cognitive distortion where their brain has created a narrative that they're a burden or that people are only being polite when they engage, and over time this belief becomes so strong that they preemptively withdraw to avoid the pain of perceived rejection, and they convince themselves that if people really cared they would reach out first, which creates a cycle where both sides are waiting for the other to make a move and nobody does. Your brain is wired to conserve energy, and one way it does this is by pruning relationships that feel one-sided or emotionally draining, and psychology calls this the relationship equity theory, where people unconsciously keep score of who's investing what, and when someone feels like they're always the one initiating, they eventually stop to see if the other person will step up. And this isn't about being petty, it's about self-preservation, because constantly being the one who reaches out first creates a psychological imbalance that feels exhausting and unfair. And when they stop, they're essentially testing whether the relationship has mutual investment or if they've been carrying it alone all along. And the silence that follows gives them their answer, and sometimes that answer is painful but necessary for their growth. Some people stop reaching out because they're going through an identity shift where they're questioning who they are and what they want from life. And during these periods of transformation, maintaining old relationships can feel inauthentic because they're not the same person they were when those connections were formed. Psychology says this is actually a healthy part of development called differentiation, where you separate your identity from others to figure out who you are independently. And it's not that they've outgrown you in a cruel way, but rather they need space to evolve without the pressure of maintaining a version of themselves that no longer fits. And this process requires solitude and reflection, and reaching out feels like pretending to be someone they're not anymore, which creates internal conflict they'd rather avoid. Research shows that people who stop initiating contact aren't necessarily depressed or angry. They might simply be in a phase where they're prioritizing depth over breadth in relationships, and your brain can only maintain meaningful connections with about 5 to 15 people at a time, according to Dunbar's number. And when someone is focusing on quality, they naturally let go of quantity, which means some relationships will fade not because they're bad, but because there's limited bandwidth for connection. And this is especially true for introverts and highly sensitive people who need extensive alone time to recharge. And for them, Stopping outreach isn't personal, it's just their way of managing their limited social energy and directing it toward the relationships that feel most aligned with their current needs and values. So if someone has stopped reaching out to you, remember that it's usually about their internal world, not your worth. And you can choose to reach out yourself without keeping score, or you can let the relationship naturally fade, knowing that sometimes people need to pull back to take care of themselves, and both choices are valid and healthy depending on what feels right for you. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and subscribe for more psychology insights that help you understand yourself and others better, because knowledge is power when it comes to navigating relationships.